Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
James had already lost track of what day of the week it was. Ever since he arrived in that beach town to oversee the installation of the branch's new servers, he'd thrown himself into work, the way he always did when starting a new project. The hours blurred together, the sun rose and set, and he barely noticed the difference between one day and the next. The hotel he was staying at was comfortable but impersonal, like all the others he'd occupied for work. The only thing that distracted him was the steady sound of waves crashing, which he could hear when he opened the window at night. On his day off, he woke up before the alarm. A rare luxury. He stretched lazily, took an unhurried shower, and decided to make the most of the day. He grabbed his towel, put on light shorts, a t-shirt, flip-flops, and set off toward the beach. It had been a week since he'd arrived, and this was the first time he was actually seeing the ocean up close. The town was famous for its vibrant tourism, packed with people from everywhere, bodies golden from the sun, smiling young people looking for fun, and James was about to feel the contrast between that carefree world and the weight he still carried inside, even after so many years. When he got to the sand, he picked a quieter spot, spread out his towel, and sat down, letting the sun gently warm his face. He watched people running, playing paddleball, laughing in groups. The sound of the waves mixing with distant chatter created a nearly cinematic atmosphere. He couldn't remember the last time he'd just stopped to exist. His gaze wandered across the scenery without rushing, until he decided to stand up and take a stroll, enjoying the feel of his feet sinking into the warm sand with each step. He was walking along, somewhat mesmerized by the back and forth of the waves, when suddenly something caught his attention. A woman was coming toward him, in the opposite direction. It was impossible not to notice her. She had a sculpted body that looked like it had been crafted by Italian artists. She was wearing only the bottom half of her bikini and large sunglasses covering part of her face. She walked naturally, like she wasn't bothered by the looks she inevitably got as she passed by. For a moment, James looked away out of respect, but something made him look again. She kept coming closer, her face still partially hidden behind her sunglasses, until she stopped. Right in front of him. "James," she said, in a voice that sent a chill down his spine. He frowned, confused. He tried to place this woman. Her body, her posture, the way she said his name, there was something familiar, but also distant. Then she took off her sunglasses with a smooth motion. And in that instant, the past hit him like a wave crashing against a rock. It was Hannah. For a second, he was speechless. Like time had frozen. There she was, after 5 years, in the flesh, and almost completely undressed. His ex-wife. The woman he'd been married to for only a year, yet whose memory had stayed with him long after. The woman who broke his heart by cheating on him with his best friend. And now she was right there, like it was the most natural thing in the world. With a light, almost innocent smile. "Is this for real?" he blurted, unable to hide the surprise. Hannah let out a soft, slightly embarrassed laugh. "I guess the universe loves to play tricks, huh?" James looked away for a moment, trying to take it all in. He felt uneasy about how exposed she was, but he also didn't want to come across as rude. There was a lot there he hadn't expected to feel. A mixture of dormant anger, nostalgia, confusion. And, more than anything, shock. It was like seeing a ghost from the past appear in a tropical paradise. She stepped in a bit closer, still looking relaxed, as if this was just another casual reunion. She told him that after their separation, she'd been offered a job in the city and decided to start over there. She said she thought a lot about what she did to him, that back then she'd been immature, acting like a rebellious teenager without any sense of consequences. She said it all in a straightforward way, like she'd rehearsed it, but with a tone of sincerity that unsettled him. James took a deep breath, thinking about how to respond. He could have said everything he'd been holding back, thrown her betrayal in her face, his hurt, the humiliation. But to his own surprise, he only said, "It's all right." I moved on. And he really had moved on. At least, that's what he believed until he saw her there again. Hannah's presence made him rethink things he thought he'd buried. But he decided he wasn't going to be stuck in that. He was there to work, to live his life. She looked at him with a hint of relief, like she'd been expecting the worst and found something much better. She suggested getting coffee, saying she knew a nearby place. James hesitated for a few seconds, but gave in. After all, it was just coffee. Nothing more. Before they left, Hannah asked him to wait while she grabbed her clothes. They walked together to where she'd left her stuff. She got dressed naturally, as if they were old friends catching up. And in a way, maybe they were. Old friends with a messy past. They went back for his towel. They walked in silence for a few steps, then she started talking about the city, about what life there was like. James listened intently, but inside he was trying to figure out if this was really happening or just some weird daydream brought on by too much sun. James never would have guessed that a simple coffee at the end of the day would turn into a routine as natural as taking a morning shower. After that unexpected meeting on the beach, he and Hannah started seeing each other all the time. It began with quick coffees, then casual lunches, and before he knew it, she was spending almost every afternoon with him. They talked about everything: work, old dreams, past mistakes. It was like time had skipped the years of distance and gone straight back to before everything fell apart. She seemed different. Or at least that's how it felt. Hours with her flew by. The hotel room, once impersonal and quiet, filled with conversation, laughter, and the intimacy that resurfaced between them. Sometimes James caught himself watching Hannah when she messed with her hair absent-mindedly or laughed at some silly joke he made. There was a comforting familiarity, but also something unsettling, like a puzzle that almost fit together but left one piece out. Still, he let it happen. After all, he was away from home, there for only a limited time, and maybe this was just a fling with an expiration date. But something gnawed at him. Whenever the day started winding down, Hannah got restless. She'd pick up her purse, check her phone, try not to look at her watch, but she would. She'd make up vague excuses about meetings or errands and say she had to leave. Sometimes she left in a rush, other times more subtly, like she hoped he wouldn't notice she was in a hurry. But James noticed. Over the days, it became impossible to ignore. He tried to broach the topic lightly. "You sure have a lot of evening appointments, don't you?" She gave a slightly embarrassed smile and said something like, "I've just gotten used to a strict schedule around here." She didn't say more. She changed the subject. And she was good at it. She could shift a conversation like she was changing TV channels with a click. And James, not wanting to ruin the mood, let it slide. But that little suspicion was already sinking its claws in. One late afternoon, coming back from a seaside restaurant, he invited her to dinner. A proper dinner, with wine and candles. She smiled, but it came too quickly, without reaching her eyes. She said she'd love to, but she had an unavoidable appointment that night. James just nodded, hiding behind a polite gesture the growing doubt inside him. That night, after she left, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of the waves drifting in through the open window, feeling like he was slipping into a story he already knew. The next day, Hannah showed up with the same easygoing vibe as always. She was carrying bags of fresh fruit from the market and a container of salad, as if they were a couple who'd been living there for months. The way she acted in his hotel room was almost domestic, way too comfortable. James went back and forth, wondering if he was judging too fast or fooling himself all over again. He started paying closer attention to the details. She never just left her phone lying around. It was always face down or in her bag. It rarely rang, and when it did, she answered too quickly. Sometimes she excused herself and went out to the hallway. She'd come back a few minutes later with the same relaxed demeanor, like she'd just stepped out for some fresh air. But her eyes, for a second, were more serious. Then he'd crack a joke, and she'd laugh like nothing happened. His doubts grew quietly. James wasn't the paranoid type, but he wasn't naive either. He'd already learned the hard way that the worst truths hide in the smallest gestures. And something about her routine screamed there was a secret. Even so, he followed the path this reunion seemed to be taking on its own. They kept seeing each other, touching each other, reconnecting. But as they got closer, her absence at night became more and more noticeable. And when she once again turned down a dinner invitation, saying she needed an early night's rest, James realized it was time to move beyond mere speculation. He wanted the truth. And if Hannah wasn't going to say it, he'd find another way. Late afternoon light was turning the buildings and the boardwalk golden, giving the city a soft, almost wistful glow. James was lying on his hotel bed with Hannah beside him, laughing at some silly story he'd just told. She was holding a glass of juice, her bare feet on the armchair, looking peaceful, like she was exactly where she wanted to be. But her eyes, though smiling, hinted at a different story. Every now and then she checked the time. She touched her phone. Fidgeted with her hands like she was rehearsing an excuse. Then came the line he'd heard so many times before, "I have to go. I still have a few things to take care of today." James just nodded gently. He didn't ask what those things were. He didn't question the urgency. She got up, straightened her clothes calmly, tossed her hair to the side, picked up her bag from the chair, and kissed him on the corner of his mouth, the way she always did. That brief, quick kiss that wrapped up every afternoon. She left the room as gracefully as she had come in. But this time, he didn't wait around for the door to close completely. He got up, grabbed the key to his rental car, went down to the garage, and found a spot where he could see the hotel's exit. A few minutes later, he saw her car around the corner and leave by the side exit. James started his engine, stayed at a safe distance, and began to follow her. By then, the sky was shifting. Hues of orange and purple filled the horizon, reflecting off the hood like a reminder that darkness was about to fall, on everything, including the truth he was about to uncover. Hannah drove casually, obviously familiar with the streets. She took a route leading away from the shoreline, through quieter areas with bigger houses, more manicured lawns, and an even quieter atmosphere. With each mile, James felt a change in the air. When she turned right onto a wide avenue with almost no one around, it all started making more sense. The house where she stopped was something else. Huge. Modern. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a pristine white facade, and lights set in the ground shining up the ornamental palm trees. The grass was neatly trimmed, the trees framing the entrance like a living painting. There were no walls, just a subtle elevation from the street and a wide stone walkway leading to the main door. It was the kind of place that stands out effortlessly. Not just a house, more like a mansion. Hannah parked in front, on the side of that stone path, and got out like she'd done it 1,000 times. She was calm, relaxed, wearing the same expression as always. She went through the glass door and disappeared inside. The landscape lights in the yard turned on as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, creating a gentle contrast between the evening glow and the cool white light of the fixtures. James stopped his car a bit farther down, between two trees, a spot where he could see without being seen. He turned off the engine, trying to steady his breathing, his heart pounding in his chest. 20 minutes went by. The sky was now a deep blue. The first stars appeared softly, and the lights in nearby houses came on one by one. Then another car pulled up, a black sedan with tinted windows. It moved slowly, headlights illuminating the perfectly swept driveway. It was an expensive car. James recognized the model, one of those luxury sedans that cost more than a year's salary for most people. The car parked next to hers. The driver's door opened. A man in a suit got out. He moved confidently, like he already knew what was waiting for him inside. James felt his fingers tense around the steering wheel. The front door opened. Hannah stepped down the 2 entrance steps with a big smile on her face. She ran over to the man and hugged him tight, a long hug. The kind that brings together 2 bodies very familiar with each other. Then she pulled back a bit, placed her hands on his cheeks, and kissed him. Slowly. Intimately. Genuinely. James looked away, like he couldn't bear to watch. His stomach churned. Even though he'd been suspicious for days, seeing it with his own eyes felt like a punch in the gut. There it was, the mansion, the luxury car, the tailored suit, and the lie, served up just like that, with a pretty bow, the way Hannah always knew how to do. He stayed in the car a few more minutes, just watching. The house lights kept coming on. The garden lights reflected in the glass windows. Hannah and the other man had already gone inside. The night had fully arrived. And he sat there, feeling the weight of every choice he'd made since their beach reunion. He started the car, turned around, and drove off quietly. He carried with him the truth he'd tried to ignore, and the bitter realization that he'd believed, once again, in something that was never really real. James woke up before his alarm. The sky outside was still dark, with just a faint deep blue tone hinting that the sun would soon appear on the horizon. The city seemed asleep, but inside him, everything was in motion. The night before, after returning to the hotel and going over every moment he'd witnessed at that mansion, the silence in his room felt heavier than any noise. He slept fitfully, his pillow damp with sweat, and now, sitting on the edge of the bed, he felt his body present but his mind floating somewhere between disappointment and anger. The hair tie Hannah had left on the desk seemed to taunt him. Such a small, harmless object on the surface, but loaded with meaning. Like she'd left a mark behind. A reminder that, for all her show of transparency, she was hiding something the whole time. He stared at it for a few seconds, then tossed it into the trash in one swift motion. It was the beginning of an ending he wasn't sure he had the nerve to see through. He spent the day focused on company tasks, but his mind kept drifting. Even while reviewing code or guiding his tech team, every quiet moment pulled him back to the same image, Hannah, arms wide, smiling, throwing herself into that man's embrace. It was burned into his memory like a badly done tattoo, impossible to ignore. At day's end, his phone buzzed gently, but the jolt to his stomach was immediate. Want to meet up? James didn't hesitate. He said yes. Not because he missed her. But because he needed to hear it straight from her mouth, without any dodges, what was really going on. Hannah arrived in her usual breezy way, like nothing was off. Her familiar perfume filled the room as soon as she walked in. She sat in the armchair by the window and started chatting, unaware that everything had already changed for him. "Where did you go yesterday?" James asked, straight to the point. She blinked a few times, caught off guard. She answered hesitantly, "I had a meeting with someone I know. It's an old project. I got the chance to start it up again." "And does that project include a giant mansion, a luxury car, and a man in a suit you kissed at the front door?" His words hit like a bucket of ice water. Hannah froze. The silence between them echoed in the room. For a moment, her face went blank. Then she slowly straightened up in the chair, crossed her legs, took a deep breath, and said, "So you followed me." There was a note of indignation in her voice, like the issue was that he'd followed her, not what he'd discovered. James stayed calm. "I did. And I don't regret it." He moved a little closer, but still kept emotional distance. "You could have told me from the start. But you chose to hide it." "Because I knew you'd leave me again," she said, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "And I didn't want to lose the only part of my life that's made sense in years." She stood up, walked toward him, and placed her hand on his chest gently, like she was trying to reach his heart. "I swear to you, James. I'm trying to fix this. But he made me sign a contract when we got married. If I file for divorce without coming to an agreement, I end up with nothing. After everything I've been through with him, everything I put up with. I don't want that. I just need time. Wait for me. Please, just wait a little longer. James closed his eyes for a moment. The touch of her hand burned. She spoke with emotion, but he no longer knew if it was genuine or just another perfect act. His past told him to run. But his heart, however battered, was still beating. With a firm move, he pulled her hand away from his chest. Go away, Hannah. I need time to think. She stood there for a few seconds, as if she didn't understand. But she saw in his eyes that the conversation was over. She picked up her bag, fixed her hair, and left. She closed the door without a sound. But the silence she left behind felt deafening. 2 days passed, wrapped in a thick fog of thoughts in James's mind. He kept up appearances at work, giving instructions, overseeing tests, even praising someone on the team for a clever solution, but it was all mechanical. Inside, he was replaying every word Hannah had said, every expression, every gesture, looking for some place where the truth might really exist. At night, lying on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, he kept picturing their final exchange. Her "wait for me" still echoed like an out-of-tune melody in his head. It was strange how a phrase so short could carry so much weight and uncertainty. Hannah swore she was trying to leave her marriage, but she wanted something in return. She didn't say it outright, but it was pretty obvious it all came down to that man's money. Like real love could just wait outside while she fought over numbers. On the third morning, James went down to breakfast earlier than usual. His face looked tense, worn out. He sat by the window, ordered only a strong black coffee, and stared at the street without really seeing anything in particular. The receptionist suddenly interrupted James while he was organizing some paperwork in his hotel room. "Mr. James, there's a man in the lobby asking to speak with you." He asked not to be announced, but he insisted it's important. James felt a chill run through him. His first thought went straight to Hannah. He stood up slowly, thanked her, and went down to the lobby with a tight feeling in his stomach. When he arrived, he saw a tall man with a confident stance, wearing a well-tailored navy blazer, polished shoes, and a direct gaze. Even before he introduced himself, James already knew exactly who he was. "Good afternoon," said the man, lifting his chin slightly. "My name is Richard. I'm Hannah's husband." James nodded slightly, keeping his composure while his heart pounded. The man didn't seem hostile. He was calm, straightforward, but there was something in his eyes that showed exhaustion, like someone who already suspected half the truth. "I had a feeling something was off," Richard began. "For a few weeks now, she's been going out a lot, always at the same time, with the same excuses. Like any man would. I hired a private investigator. And I got this." He pulled out a thin envelope and showed James 2 photos, printed on glossy paper. One showed Hannah and James entering the hotel together. The other showed the two of them on the balcony, laughing, her face leaning against his shoulder. The kind of image that leaves no room for misunderstandings. James stared at the pictures for a moment, then looked up calmly. "Richard, I'm going to tell you the truth, because that's what you deserve. I was married to Hannah years ago. We were together for a short time. It ended when I found out she was cheating on me, with my best friend. We hadn't seen each other since then. Until, by chance, we ran into each other here. I'm only here temporarily. I work in tech, handling the server installation for my company's local branch. We met on the beach, we talked, and she said she was single." He paused briefly, looking the man in the eye. "When I found out she was married, I stepped back. There was nothing else after that. And honestly, I'm sorry it happened at all. I never would have gotten involved with a married woman, especially with our history." Richard studied James for a few seconds, then placed the photos back in the envelope with the same deliberate calm. "Thank you for being honest," he said, extending his hand. James shook it firmly. There was no anger, just a quiet relief on both sides. Richard turned and left like a man who'd already made up his mind. That same night, just before 8, there was a knock on James's hotel room door. He opened it, and there she was, Hannah. Wearing jeans, a plain white top, hair loose, no makeup. Her eyes were watery, her tone softer than usual. "I managed to get a divorce," she said immediately, not even stepping inside. "I ended things with him. Told him I want a different life. I'm tired of living an empty life. And I chose you, James. I want to be with you." James stood there, looking at her without showing much emotion. But inside, the puzzle pieces were falling into place. Richard never told her he'd confronted James. And now she was here with a story about a spontaneous split, acting like she'd been the one to pull the plug. But James knew exactly what had happened. Richard had seen the photos, confronted Hannah, and instead of fighting, he'd simply pointed her to the door. No legal battle, no settlement, no payout. And here she was, weaving yet another fictional chapter. "Where are you staying?" James asked, his expression neutral. "At a hotel nearby. I'm there for now, until I figure out what to do," she said. He was quiet for a few seconds, like he was thinking it over. Then he said, "I still need time. Let's meet tomorrow night, okay?" She nodded, stepped forward like she was going to hug him, but he held the door with one hand, stopping her. Hannah got the hint, forced a small smile, and left with a restrained wave. Early the next morning, James got up, packed his suitcase, checked out of the hotel without fanfare, and headed straight to the airport. The company had requested his immediate return late the night before. Silently, he boarded the plane, took a window seat, watched the city shrink below him, and felt relief. Once he landed, he turned on his phone just to do one last thing: block Hannah's number. No explanation. No long messages. Just an end. And in that moment, he felt that for the first time in years, he'd really closed a door he should have locked a long time ago. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.